Om Nam. Thank you very much. During today's introductory, I'll briefly mention what kind of suffering do we usually experience and how that comes about. Okay? So, previously we talked about the 4 major suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Okay? That's something that we all have to go through. By choosing to be born, and we chose this body, then we go through the birth of this body, then the aging of this body, then all kinds of sicknesses appear. First we can fix them, then later on it's harder and harder, and then one of the sicknesses just takes us, and then this body dies. So that's the 4 main suffering. And there are 4 smaller kinds of suffering, which is not getting what you want, getting what you don't want, being in the presence of those that you dislike, or being separated from those that you love. Okay? These are the 4 plus 4, the 8 kinds of suffering. But let me ask you, how many kinds of suffering are there on this earth? Infinite. So, we say this so that you would have an open mind about it, but if you open, the television, if you open the newspaper, you can see without any analysis, there are so many kinds of suffering. Innumerable. Okay? So we have 84,000, which is the number of infinity, 84,000 kinds of suffering, as well as we have 84,000 kinds of remedies to heal this suffering. Now, we will examine today how this suffering comes about, how it's born, okay? And the Buddha taught that the 12 links in the chain of dependent origination, sorry for the long name, is a description of how this happens, okay? And there are 12 steps how we create our suffering, okay? And the first step is the most important step because that's something usually even practitioners not understand so much. The first step is we call ignorance. In Sanskrit, avidya. Literally it means not seeing. Not seeing. Okay? Or not perceiving. Okay? So, in practice, what does that really mean? So that this would not be so philosophical for you. Avidya or ignorance means when you cannot see things as they are, okay? When you cannot see this as gray, when you cannot see the sky as blue, when you cannot see the other person as he or she truly is, because you have ideas. Ideas of good and bad, right and wrong, high and low, like and dislike, okay? That's ignorance. So when ignorance is born, then the next step is mental formations. Mental formation also, don't go to the psychological bookstore to see what it is. Look inside. Inside you find your own mental formations which you create. You say, this kind of person, good. That kind of person, bad. That's the mental formation. Okay? And out of the mental formation comes some kind of consciousness. When you attribute some kind of quality to a person. So if you are really judgmental, then for the rest of his or her life, that person will be good for you or bad for you, no matter what that person does. And this is number 1 stupid. Sometimes you can see that relationships, they really break because they cannot see themselves as they are. They sit next to each other on the sofa, watching television 4 hours a day, and in 10, 15 years, they cannot see each other as they truly are. Because of the ideas. So, ignorance, mental formations, consciousness. Then some kind of name and form appear in your mind. Some kind of image appears. Then you think that this is real, existing outside you. That means you are blind to the movement, to the mental creation, how that came to being, okay? So, when you practice, then these really difficult philosophical concepts will have meaning. Not some kind of explanatory meaning, but something which you experience. So when you practice, then you can perceive how your mind creates ignorance. So ignorance is not a lack of knowledge, okay? Sometimes very clever people are so ignorant that it's very painful to see them and hear them, because they believe they are very, very clever. But without wisdom, this remains just ideas, just some kind of ignorance, okay? And when you see this ignorance in operation, it breaks the world into 2, 4, 8, 16, many parts. And our practice means become one. So when you put down all these ideas, then you and this world become one. You and other people become one. Because there are no discriminative thoughts, no ideas, therefore, no ignorance. When your ignorance machine or differentiation machine begins to work, then in your mind polarities appear, like and dislike, plus and minus. So you attract certain people and you reject certain other people. You can see that in your relationship. So for you, like for all sentient beings, the world is not just like this. The world is torn apart into good and bad, like and dislike. That's very interesting, because in one of the old books, a non-Buddhist old book, they say that the moment you eat from the tree of knowing good and bad, you lose heaven. You lose the Garden of Eden. Now you can see from a different angle how it works. Okay? So it's not some old myth. Every kind of old story or old mythology can be traced back to some mental practice inside. And then they were put into stories. But when the practice which created this kind of insight was diminishing, then only the stories remained. Okay? And then later people have very different ideas about these stories, so they don't understand that. If Buddhism becomes extinct, it will be for one reason: the lack of practice. Because it's not enough to read and understand this. What's really necessary that you re-attain this. Many generations before us have been doing the same thing. Listening, understanding, attaining, using. Okay? We cannot bypass that. There is no shortcut. Okay? If there were, we would be using it all the time, sparing your time, energy, etc. But there is no shortcut. So you have to go through your own hell of anger, desire, and ignorance, see how you create that, and remove that. Remove that creation. Okay? And then you become clear. Then you become complete. Then you don't chop the world into good and bad, right and wrong, like and dislike. Everything will be its own specific quality. We say just like this, or in Sanskrit, tathata. Likeness. Just suchness, okay? So that's the way it goes if you practice. But if not, you believe your ideas are real. And just as to give you the other steps, the more coarse steps of the 12 links, then the 6 sense realms become very real for you, as if not created by your mind, as if existing by themselves. So eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and thinking. Then you lose control over that. Then you don't know how these senses operate. Then you suffer through these senses. Okay? And then the next, of course, is touch. Then there's direct contact with something which is already alienated from you, which is not you anymore. Okay? And then comes sensation, desire, clinging, existence, life, old age, suffering, and death. Okay? These are already very, I would say, coarse levels of becoming or existence. The first 3, which we talked about in detail, and especially the first, is very important. So ignorance means dualistic thinking. We have seen this very clearly during the last 10 minutes. Dualistic thinking. If you believe that your dualistic thinking is real and the world is like that, then you go through the other 11 steps. Okay? Then your life and death will be also very real, completely out of your control, completely something which is your destiny. And when the 6th patriarch says originally nothing, that means originally you have no karma. Originally you have no destiny. You make it. You make it. And if you don't make anything, then this kind of karmic bondage totally disappears. We call that liberation. So, anybody has any questions? Any kind? Please ask.
I heard that you did a vow of silence at Musangsa. Is that
No,
true?
that's not me. That's
that's
the
not you. Okay, well, my question is just about the nature of words, and I know they say, you know, the truth isn't in words and you shouldn't like talk so much, but for a person who has to work with speaking all the time, or like
wow, you must be an English teacher. Welcome to the realm of words and speech. Okay, please finish the question, then I answer.
I think that's it.
Oh, good. So, being in the realm of words and speech is a very, very good experience. You will see how feeble, how impermanent human words are. And you will also see how heavy and how meaningful words can be. What is distinguishing between the two? It's you. In English, there's an interesting sentence. Do you really mean it? If you mean it 100%, then that word is the absolute truth at that moment. If you just say it jokingly, haphazardly, not really meaning it, then it's very light, goes away. Okay? So, most important, do not attach to words and speech. You see how we create these concepts, so use them correctly. Always express what you really want. You want to joke? Joke. You want to tell a little lie, white lie? Then do that, but be careful. Okay? You want to say the absolute truth, then perceive very clearly, do that. Okay? We can see very well, whether you are a language teacher or not, that words and speech are very relative. Okay? So, originally, this object, what do we call this? Yeah, it's a watch. But in my language, it's ora. Okay? Ora. And in many other languages, it has many other names. In Korean, shige. Yeah, good. So then, if you look at this and ask, what's your real name? Okay, so no name appears. Then you understand that we make the names. We attribute them to forms. So if you look at that, if you look at this process, then you will never confuse reality with names, reality with speech. But when somebody says truly, really truly, from the bottom of his heart, I love you, you can believe that. Okay? So that's very, very important, how we use words. What kind of power or meaning we have in them. Okay? So, perceive words. Don't be afraid of words. Use words. Don't attach to words. Then your speech can be bodhisattva speech. Okay? And concerning silence practice, I didn't do 1 year, but during our 90-day retreats, we usually keep silence. And I can tell you it's one of the most healing practices. Okay? Because this mouth can create lots of bad karma. Okay? Because we don't perceive the meaning and the cause and effect of our speech. And then sometimes big suffering appears. One word, and the life is broken. Just like that. You have seen that. Sometimes you may have even experienced that in your own life. So if you are in total power of your own talk, then this kind of suffering would not appear. So silence practice is very healing. And it's very easy. Just don't talk. And when you don't talk for some time, you see how many sentences there are in here. This immense amount of thinking which you just unwittingly just splurt out, just spit out at other people and this world, remains inside. And then you see, is it really me thinking like that? Impossible. That's not me. Okay? So then you realize what kind of thinking you have. what kind of speech or talk you would have if you opened your mouth and then you change your own view about yourself, which is very healthy. It doesn't become this really, I'm so bad, no. As adult means use when necessary, don't use when not necessary. It's very important with any kind, not just speech, any area of life, any kind of function, okay? So likewise, if you totally attain silence, you can totally attain correct speech, okay? So don't be afraid of speech. Use speech. But when you use it too much, you get exhausted. So too many lessons, then get tired, okay? So sometimes rest. Thank you. More questions?
I have a question related to speech again. Yeah. I was wondering if you had any practical advice about how to break bad habits of speech, or maybe even more generally any bad habits of behavior with other people, but start with speech maybe. How do you actually reform your speech?
Actually, the first very important cure is when you notice that you would say something inappropriate, simply stop it. Fall silent. That's very important. Because when you accidentally want to throw somebody over the abyss and you can stop your hand, you saved a life. So when you can stop yourself talking something really bad or detrimental or poisonous, sometimes speech can be poison. It remains in people's minds and starts to operate, So when you notice that you would inject that poison right this moment, stop. Don't talk. Say, excuse me, then you go out. Then you reflect. Oh my gosh, what would I have done? That's the first. So perceive this speech karma. The next, do some practicing, because you realize that if you don't cultivate your mind, you cannot take away this speech habit. So during cultivation, you are silent. That means no speech. Detach from this karma. And if you constantly come back to silence, constantly come back to don't know mind, that is not talking mind, not thinking mind, then the speech habit disappears because you don't exercise it. It will reappear in your consciousness many times, knocking at the door. Hey, I want your mouth to move. I want you to talk me out. Can you do that for me? And then you don't say anything, no judgment. It's just the interplay of your consciousness, okay? So you just sit there and return to your mantra, return to your question. It's a very simple job, but if you try, you see it's an immensely big job, okay? Not difficult, not easy. It's just something you do to keep your mind clear. And then the speech habit disappears without a trace. We talked about non-self before, and we talked about objects as they put together from parts. And you remove the parts entirely, there is nothing which would live on. Karma operates exactly in the same way. So if you totally take the energy out of your habit and you don't exercise it anymore, you detach from it, you return to not moving mind, not speaking mind, not thinking mind, then that habit can disappear without a trace. You won't even remember it. And that's the key point. You should be brave enough to forget that habit. First, it's our identity. That's us. That's I. That's me. Then you see, it's really not necessary. That particular karma, I don't want. But as long as you have opposites relationship, judgmental relationship, holding relationship, any kind of attachment, you cannot remove this energy because you constantly fuel this energy. Before you saw it, you wanted it to grow. Okay? You used it. You see the result, now you hate it. You dislike it. Equally wrong. So when you keep a completely clear mind, clear like space, clear like a mirror, then this kind of habit disappears by itself. Okay? In some traditions they call it liberation by pure awareness. That's what you have to keep. Vimalakirti said, the great lay practitioner, the patient endurance of the uncreated or uncreated mind, or the mind which is before creation. So that is something which we can experience. That is something we can attain and we can keep, and then we can control our karma. Okay? Okay. More questions?
I have a lot of time on my own these days in the evening, so I have a lot of time for thinking. So my thinking is really it's not comfortable. So I try practice some, but I don't like even watching it or whatever. Sometimes it's fine, but many times it's just, and I don't like, so I'm attached to don't like my thinking. So I started to do some crochet, some handcraft, because because that's more peaceful for me.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's very calm. But I'm wondering, is that it? I'm thinking maybe I'm just trying to avoid my thinking, so I'm doing something that's much more pleasant. And should you practice if it feels very uncomfortable?
So, very good question. When you stop the handicraft, what happens? Yeah, when you stop making your own little handicraft, what happens?
I think about starting the next one.
Yeah, that's good. But when you don't start the next one, because there's no more time for handicraft,
well,
and your thinking can reappear, does it reappear?
If I can keep myself busy, actually, it can, but it doesn't appear. But yeah, I guess if there are moments where I have nothing to do, or if I hadn't got it there, it would appear eventually.
So at that time, when your mind has nothing to do, then the same habit reappears, sometimes even stronger. But what you do is actually a very natural response. And we call that outer path Zen. Later I'll talk about the 5 types of Zen. But one is when you give the mind a certain object to meditate on. Actually, it's a very healthy thing to do handicraft instead of thinking. When monks go to temple and they are novices, they do a lot of working Zen, okay? Working meditation, ulyok, okay? Lots of work, because that takes away thinking. They cannot practice yet, too strong. So they're thinking too strong. So they work a lot, bow a lot, chant a lot. So that gives different object to the mind to cultivate, because they cannot control that energy so well as yet. But over time, you have to get down to the real business, which is directly perceiving your thinking, dare to face it, and dare not to touch it. And then you stop being judgmental. If you stop being judgmental, you made the first step. What use is it if you hate yourself? If you hate your karma? It's totally useless. What is it useful for if you start to like your karma? Also, not necessary. So see your karma as it is, and use in the appropriate situation, and don't use when the situation is not appropriate. And then something real appears. We call that genuinely human. Okay? Very natural. Genuinely human. So don't be afraid of your karma. Being afraid doesn't help. In fact, it invites disaster. You know the victim type? Oh, I will have an accident, please. I don't want an accident. Bam! Right there. Okay? So this is the type which gets into an accident just because he or she is afraid of it. Okay? So don't do that. Don't be afraid of your karma. Don't hate your karma. Don't do that. When you are ready inside, see it. Go beyond it. Then use it. Okay? Thank you for your attention. We continue next time.
이 프로그램은 더불어 사는 즐거움 전동 휠체어 전동 스쿠터 전문 업체 JS 홈쇼핑 협찬입니다.